So does anybody, I know, I've taken up your time, so, yes.
City Council is considering or has considered changing the felony status from $500 to $1,000. What impact is that going to have? And then City Council is also looking at making adult marijuana possession lowest priority. Your thoughts on both of those?
Okay, the legislature made the change you're talking about. And theft in the felony level is controlled by state statute. And they made that change. And they upped the level. What they did was they created a new theft crime that we never had before. We had, of course, that amount. They changed the felony level from 500 to 1,000. And then they made the area in between a misdemeanor. And all of those offenses that have a value, like property damage, all of those went up to 1,000. They hadn't done that in a long time. And I think it was to recognize just kind of inflationary and that type of thing. The impact that it'll have is that our felonies will go down, but our misdemeanors will go up. And the one area that I'm faced with now is my felonies peaked out and have started to decline some in the last 2 years. And part of that is those crime statistics that you've seen. But my misdemeanors have gone up 30% every year since I've been the district attorney. And they're going to go up at least 30% again. Part of that is the creation of new crimes that are misdemeanors and not felonies. What that does is it puts a real tough weight on our county jail. Because what happens is that misdemeanors are paid for by the local taxpayers, not by the state. And so those, every time the legislature makes a crime from a felony to a misdemeanor, those costs are passed on to the locals. If somebody gets convicted of a misdemeanor, they're housed at our county jail as opposed to the Department of Corrections. So, I mean, we're trying to get a handle on our misdemeanors. But a lot of our misdemeanors have gone up because I think we have a much younger police department than we've had, certainly in the last 25 years. We have a larger police department than we've had in the last 25 years. And they're out on the streets. Most of the older 30-year, 35-year-old officers have retired in the last 2 or 3 years. And they've been replaced by young officers that are out on the streets, that are very active, and a lot of the type of crimes that they are charging people with are the kinds of crimes we're concerned about. The graffiti and those types of offenses that are just quality of life issues, and that's what they're out doing. And so we're seeing an increase there. Yes? Rosemary, how are you?
Do you want to comment on the issue that I know a lot of people read about how certainly dealing with that in the legislature on the collection and management of evidence?
Mm-hmm.
Could you please comment on that?
Yeah, there was a series in the Post about the collection and management of evidence, and actually I think that Colorado does a very good job of it. The one problem I have is that, I'm a Denver guy. I deal with the Denver police, their property bureau, the issues there, but we're very good at collecting evidence and storing it in a way that it can be used by either the defense or the prosecution. A lot of those horror stories, well, the 2 Colorado examples they talked about were cases that were from the 80s. And we've changed a lot of things since the 80s. In fact, the one case from Denver predated DNA evidence. And certainly the way that police looked at a crime scene and what they collected, how long they kept it, those kinds of things in 1987 were a whole lot different than they are now. So I don't necessarily agree that there's this huge problem that they presented in those articles, because they couldn't find examples in Colorado to write their stories about other than 2 20-year-old or over 20-year-old cases. And I go around teaching people about DNA all the time, certainly a lot of investigators, and you start talking to them about, and I can point out the different things I get DNA off of here that people may not even think about. And I guarantee you in 87, a detective or a patrolman wasn't thinking about it at all. But now, we're teaching them about that. We do it at the academy level. We do it all the time in our refresher courses. I have one DA that goes around to all the roll call meetings in Denver, no matter when they are, and she has taught them about looking for DNA evidence when you just get called to a burglary or a car break-in. So, I can't talk for La Honda or Colorado Springs or those places, but one thing I can tell you in Denver, if you have to go back 25 years to find an example of evidence destruction, I think we're probably pretty good at it. I'm on the committee, though, and I'm going to be hopefully helping you guys and talking about it. And, I think it's always important to look at how can we do this better. My concern is that one side's probably not going to fit all. What the Denver police do is probably not something that the La Honda Police Department or sheriff can afford to do. So what do you do about that? But what I can tell you is from my experience with Denver, Aurora, and some of the places just around Denver, they're very good at finding evidence, collecting it, and preserving it. The marijuana thing, I didn't answer your question on that. That's an interesting thing because I went to that council meeting, and I believe they're going to put it on the ballot, and I believe that it may or may not pass, but it doesn't mean anything because until they annex Denver out of Colorado, which I don't think is going to happen, the people that work for me, the Denver Police Department, and those city attorneys that are sworn in as district attorneys are sworn to uphold the law of Colorado and the Constitution of Colorado. There was an effort to change and allow that amount of marijuana to be legal in Colorado, and it failed. I believe it failed pretty miserably. And so as long as I'm a state official, and as long as people that work for me, and that's a law in the books, we have to prosecute those offenses. When they talk about making it low priority, I don't think you can make it any lower priority. You cannot arrest somebody for that amount of marijuana, and no one can go to jail for that amount of marijuana. I think running the stop sign is a more, I think it's a more dangerous offense, but it's certainly an offense that you can go to jail for. And you can't. The legislature has made a very reasonable punishment for that offense. If you get cited, you have to go to court, you might have to pay a fine. So it can't be any lower priority. And it's a dilemma for council because they really can't tell the mayor and the police chief how to enforce the law.
So why bother with it?
It's symbolic. And I don't know why we fill our have you ever seen the city ordinance manual in Denver? It's a pretty thick book. I don't know why we would put symbolic things in there, but
could you maybe advise them? Isn't the city attorney supposed to do that?
Yeah, the city attorney was there. David Broadwell advised them what he thought the two options were. I advised them of a third option I thought was viable. I think the most viable option is to let the voters decide it, and then let the courts determine if it's constitutional or not. It's a violation of separation of powers. But what will happen? It'll never get challenged. So it'll just be on the books, and it won't have any impact. And what concerned me was that there was part of it that said that if an officer arrested somebody, they had to report, or cited somebody, they had to report it to some panel, and then it would go in their personnel file that they enforced the law in the state of Colorado. And I thought, well, that would make the union, and that would probably be kind of a strange thing to do to a police officer. But they dropped that part out. I think it was controversial, so they dropped that part out. It's a very strange. I always thought, if you replace the word marijuana and just put murder in there, do you think the city council would pass that? I don't think they would. But there's something about marijuana that makes people
Mitch, I don't want you to get rid of this.
Poor.
I know we need to
Silly.
move on. Silly.